Hi, I'm Lucy Empson and I'm a Network Connector working here at Teach First, and I've got the absolute pleasure of supporting our Ambassador Head Teacher Network, which is known as Heads Forward. And I'm joined for a conversation today by Rebecca, who's a 2006 Ambassador. Rebecca, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I did Teach First in 2006 in a school in Enfield in North London, and I taught geography.
Fantastic. So could you just give us an overview of your career journey from starting a Teach First programme to where you are now?
Yeah, it's been quite a journey. So I applied for Teach First in my third year of uni. And if I'm honest, I applied simply because I didn't want to do an office job, and all the other things at careers fairs look like that. And so I applied and got accepted. And that was really exciting. And I sort of thought, okay, I'll do this for 2 years. And then I'll go and do something like what everyone else is doing. And then that didn't happen, because the minute I stepped into my first lesson, I realised that it was just the best job in the whole world. And as I said, I was placed in Enfield in 2006, and that cohort was the first cohort of Teach First that also had ambassadors placed in Manchester. So it was the first time that there were kind of multi-city ambassadors, and there weren't very many up north. And I stayed for just under 3 years. I became head of geography in my second year and head of humanities in my third year. And in that time, I became quite frustrated with students coming into my lessons. And I taught geography, but I also taught all of the other humanities subjects. And there were children who would turn up aged 11 and they weren't able to read fluently and they weren't able to write very well. And it's really interesting, actually, the news this week has shown that children in the UK, their reading is now really good, and that's because of a whole drive around phonics. But that wasn't the case back in 2003. And a lot of what I was being asked to do was to deliver literacy through my subject, and there was really little focus on my subject, which I was kind of okay with. I wasn't in love with my subject, but it just struck me as confusing and as a system that wasn't working effectively for the children who needed it the most. And I started to do research into early years, and I started to think about maybe becoming a primary teacher, and really kind of going back to what is the thing that makes the most difference to children. And really it's like 0 to 5, and how do we get that right? And I did a lot of kind of talking to people and did some traveling, some of it with Teach First. And then I heard about a school that was starting, and it had the first Teach First head teacher, Max Heimendorf. And I applied for that school as head of humanities, which was a kind of sideways move, got the role, and then met some amazing people and started a school with them. One of them was Natasha Porter, who's gone on to start Unlocked, which takes graduates and puts them into prisons, and some other amazing people. And in the starting of that school, we went to visit schools in the States, in Houston in Texas. And we saw Teach for America alumni who had come together as a group, and they were 20 years ahead of us. And so they were kind of on the cusp of having their 20th anniversary celebration. And they had come together with a really clear vision and started schools that were not perfect, and they've been on a big journey with that, but they were doing something dramatically different to what was there in the rest of the system. And they were charter schools. And so I kind of went to KSA, and we took lots of what we learned in the States. And then I went to another school and was deputy head for a while. And then the free school policy happened in the UK, which meant that anybody could apply to start a school. And I went for lunch with an 03 ambassador called Jacob, and I said to him, what I really want to do is just start my own school. I want it to be all through. I want to work with families right from pregnancy and pre-pregnancy all the way through their career at school, and just work in a completely different way. And he said, oh, you should speak to Ed Vainker, who's also a Teach First ambassador. He's an 03. He's working for Teach for All, and he's in Washington at the moment, and he's been talking about the same thing, and you're saying the same things to me. So Ed and I had a Skype, which was what you did back in those days. Zoom wasn't a thing. And we sort of tested each other. And we said things like, you know, what do you think about school uniform, and what do you think about homework, and all of these kinds of questions that we're trying to kind of see if we were aligned. And at the end of it, we spoke for about 2 hours. It was a Saturday, and we said, okay, like, this has been really nice, it's been really nice to talk to you, like, what do we do? And there were kind of two options. One was that we left the call and said, thank you very much, that's really nice. And the other was that we quit our jobs and started a school, or tried to. And we decided that we were going to do that. And so we decided to get a team around us, and built a team of people who had skills that complemented ours. So we had a lawyer, a finance director, a project manager, and put in an application to start a free school. And that application was ultimately successful, even though the interview was the hardest thing we've ever done, and we really thought that we hadn't been successful. And we kind of locked ourselves in a room for a whole week before that with the board, like, firing questions at us, and we massively over prepared, and wrote something like 432 pages. Because there was no word limit or no page limit at that time, because the free school movement was really new, and we were really conscious that we were really young and inexperienced, and so we kind of overcompensated. And since then, the DfE have put a page limit on the size of applications, because they couldn't read all of it. And when we went to our interview, we put another 300 pages of policies that we'd written down, which no one ever opened. It could have been completely blank paper. And so in 2012, after a lot of hard work, Reach Academy Feltham opened its doors to children. And we are a small school, purposefully, and we're all through. So we have children from the age of 2 up to the age of 19 in one building. So we've got 922 children in the building. And we've grown incrementally year on year. The children who started, so when we started, we took children in reception in year 7. Those first reception children who I met when they were 3 years old are now in year 10 and going into year 11 next year. And we've got whole families in the school, and it's really magical. We've got families who've got children who've left our school, and they've got big enough age gaps between their children that they've got more children in primary. And so our relationship with those families is like going to be 30, 40 years long. It's really a remarkable thing. And the school's been successful. Like in 2017, we had our first GCSE results, and we came 16th in the country for Progress 8. And this year we celebrated our 10-year anniversary, and have also done other things in that time. Like, we've started a children's hub to really deepen our impact and an opportunity to work with the community here in Feltham. And we really try and work in a particular way. So we never want to do for people things that they can do for themselves. We never put programs or things above people. We do a lot of listening, a lot of being humble, and not assuming that we know the right answers for our community. And it's really a pleasure every day.
The thing that just stood out for me in that whole story is, imagine if you had both decided that was a conversation and you carried on doing what you were doing.
Yeah.
Thinking about all the hundreds of families that you've had such a positive impact on, like, that's actually quite a scary thought, that could have been an actual, something that could have been a reality. So what is it, Rebecca, that inspires and motivates you to support the education of children that are in Feltham?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think why Feltham? There were like a number of reasons why we picked Feltham for our school. The number one reason being that it's a community that has historically been really underserved and has high levels of deprivation. The percentage of young people that go on to higher education is 20% currently in Feltham, and in neighbouring wards it's 80, 90, 100%. And the borough we're in is a funny shaped borough. We've got like Chiswick and Kew at one end, and then we've got Feltham at the other end. And there are just a lot of challenges here, but also when people were starting schools when we were, there were things like buildings were getting in the way, but being out in Feltham meant that we could find a building and could actually build a school. And it's really well connected on the train line, so it meant that staff can get here and they can still live they can either live in London if they want to, but they can also move out and live in Surrey and still get to the schools. There were lots of factors that were kind of at play. But in terms of like, why Teach First? Why was it appealing to me? Why do I still do it after all these years? I grew up on a council estate in Kent, and went to a primary school that wasn't very good. I didn't learn a huge amount, and I was sort of put in the corner with a textbook. I learned quite a lot of swear words, which came in quite handy later in life, but not much else. And I actually looked up the results in preparation for this conversation, and it still is really underperforming after, you know, many years since I've been there. Single parent family, like all of the things that you would assume. And when I was choosing my secondary school, I was really aware that the local secondary schools didn't have very good reputations. And, you know, the real choice was like, you went to the secondary school and you probably would be pregnant or in prison by the time you left. Like that was the reality. And I really didn't want to do that. And my mum had like invested a huge amount of time in helping me to read, and I kind of could read from a really early age. And I remember being on a train with her, and I saw an advert for a school that was a kind of 20-minute drive away from my house, but by public transport was like an hour and a half away. And it was a girls' school, and the girls just looked so happy. And I'd never seen students at a school looking so happy. And I begged my mum to go to the open day. And I went in, and all the other schools I'd visited had like lino floors or concrete floors, and this school had carpet. It's like such a small thing. I was like, oh my God, like the girls are happy and there's carpet in the school. This is amazing. And so I sat the test. It was a selective school because we were in Kent, not a grammar school, like outside of the grammar school system, selective school. And I got in miraculously. And I'm the only person ever from my primary school. My sister took the test and got in, so I didn't know anyone that had gone to this school. And it was amazing. And it really showed me that like experiences, exposure, and education like really are all you need to change like the trajectory of someone's life. Like you don't need money, you don't need anything else. And I had amazing friends, and I would like spend my weekends at their houses, and I had things like hummus for the first time, and like an Indian takeaway, and just stuff that didn't even know existed. Like I literally didn't know what hummus was when it was put in front of me. And their parents would take me to the theatre and read newspapers at breakfast time. And it's just not fair that some children have that experience and some children don't. And it's not fair that by virtue of your socioeconomic background, you either have the prospect of a great life or you have the prospect of quite a lot of struggles. And there is a way out, and the way out is education. And so that's why I do this work every day.
And it's really interesting what you said there about a carpet being such a small thing, but it's not a small thing, because what you're talking about there is your environment, like the environment that you're in. And that makes a huge difference on like the experience you can have when you're in any situation in your life. And so when you think about your school, are there any stories that kind of jump out when you think about your personal impact? Are there any stories of pupils that you've worked with that you think, wow, that was a huge impact that we had on that one child's life? And how does it make you feel when you think about that?
Yeah, I find that question really hard, because nothing that happens in a school is about one person. Like everything is about a team. There are definitely, you know, there are families that I've worked really closely with. We do a home visit before every child starts school. And sometimes we do a lot of home visits to students because of positive things, but also if there are struggles along the way. And so I've spent a lot of time like in family homes and really building up strong relationships. And I think like there are some individuals that spring to mind, but there are also just like the deep trust that you have with a family when you've worked together for so long, and the ability for you both to be vulnerable. Like and that we say on home visits, like when we go into homes, you say like our relationship is going to be really long and there will be ups and downs. Like that's normal in a relationship. And it's okay if sometimes you're upset with me and sometimes I'm upset with you, or we need to have a difficult conversation. That doesn't mean the relationship isn't working. It means that it's a relationship, and that's okay. And like I think the times when I've seen the impact of that relationship is when students have left us. So when some of our earlier cohorts have left and gone to university or gone into the world of work, when they're in crisis, they come back to school. That's their safe place. Or they phone me, or I get an email out of the blue saying, can you call me please on a Sunday night? And that's how you know that like that relationship has worked. It's because when they need somebody, if the school or people in the school or me personally are the thing that springs to mind, that tells me that we've done a good job and that we've built those relationships really, really well.
That's so powerful. And just thinking that is so far from the experience of the majority of pupils in the UK, of families in the UK. Yeah, that's wow. The other thing that you also mentioned earlier on in our conversation is that you went to America.
Yeah.
So being part of this like Teach First community, what other opportunities have you kind of tapped into along the way that has supported you to get to this point in your career?
Yeah, it's a great question. Well, I got a husband out of Teach First, so that was a good thing. And some of my best friends, so they support me, and we support each other. One of my best friends, someone who was a bridesmaid for me, and I was a bridesmaid for her, we met on Summer Institute. Like we met, you know, in staying in Canterbury in the Halls of Residence. Other things that I've done, so I've been to visit schools in Sweden with Teach First. I've been to New Orleans with Teach for All. I've had the opportunity to chair the Heads Forward network. I've kind of met incredible people who are doing incredible things. I think the most powerful thing about being part of this network is the knowledge that if I get an ask or a request or an email from a Teach Firster, I will stop what I'm doing and put that first, because there's like a secret code. And similarly, like, you know, if I send an email to a Teach Firster or I send them a WhatsApp, like you get a response very quickly. It's like being part of this secret gang that's like on a mission to change the world. But it's not very secret because most people know about it. But I don't think most people know about all of those conversations. Like the Heads Forward network is so powerful. We were, you know, there were messages flying around last night. Like someone asked a question that were grappling with in their school. And I don't know how many people messaged. And off the back of that, I messaged them and said, how are you doing in your new school? And then we had a chat about how it's going in her new school. And it's just knowing that support network is there. It's incredibly powerful.
Yeah, and I'll just echo that with Heads Forward. Obviously, I'm completely biased, but it has this like magic ingredient, and it is that joint experience of having all done the Teach First training program, all fully aligned on the mission, and it doesn't matter what stage of like your leadership career you are, there is someone that has been in your shoes that is turning around and reaching their hand out to you to help you on your way. And there really is that sense of collaboration. And yeah, just you're right, like the thing that happened yesterday in the WhatsApp group, there were like 10 responses within like 2 hours to a question that someone was sitting in their school alone thinking about. And instantly it's the power of that hive mind, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's really, really powerful.
And there's no judgment as well. I think that's really important, because you know, being a school leader, there are so many things that you're grappling with and so many things that you come up against that you've never encountered before, because you're dealing with people and you know, there's so many variables. And you know, people can put something in the chat and say, am I right here? And people will say, no, actually you're wrong. And there's no judgment there. It's just a really safe space so that you don't make a mistake, and so that you've checked something with somebody and you know that you'll get an honest answer. Yeah. And that's also like completely invaluable.
Yeah, absolutely. And so obviously we've got that head teachers network, but there's also so many other networks we work with. There's the SLT networks, there's subject specialist networks as well. So yeah, there really is like something for ambassadors to tap into regardless of where you're at and what you're doing. So we are obviously marking 20 years since the first Teach First cohort began their summer institute this year. So I wanted to ask you, what does 20 years of Teach First mean to you?
Yeah. So I hosted one of the ambassador dinners, or not even ambassador, participant and ambassador, the dinner things the other day in the lead up to the gathering. And it was just so exciting. I was sat beside two current participants who are in their second year, and they were just bubbling with enthusiasm about what they're achieving in their school, what they could achieve in the future, and hearing them talk to people that were 2, 5, 10 years ahead of them and be inspired by those people was just wonderful. And so I think there's two pieces. There's the kind of looking back and being really excited about what has been achieved, and a huge amount has been achieved. Like, London schools are dramatically different now to how they were when I started Teach First, and I don't think that is, I think that is in part because of Teach First. I think that having an injection of enthusiastic people who really deeply care about the mission has made an impact in schools, not only in London but also around the country now. And there are some people who have gone on to do incredible things and have been recognised for those things. And there are loads of people that haven't been nationally recognised and are doing absolutely phenomenal work. And loads of people that are in schools every single day, just doing what they do and making a huge impact on people's lives. And it's really exciting to be able to come together and celebrate that. And then it's really exciting to look forwards and think about, what does the next 20 years hold? And collectively, what can we commit to? Because achieving what we want to achieve will take a whole group of people. It's not about one person or one school or one classroom. It's about every child having an amazing experience and being able to have a life of choice and opportunity at the end of their educational experience. And if we can all figure out what our part is in that, and that is not just in schools, that's in social enterprises, in businesses, in volunteering, in being on governing bodies, there's loads of different roles. But if everyone that has done Teach First or is doing it currently can figure out what their part is to play in that, then we'll get a bit closer to achieving it. And that's what we need.
Yeah, totally agree. And that leads us quite nicely to, you're going to be speaking at the July 1st event, the Great Ambassador Gathering, aren't you?
Yeah.
And Reach is also going to have a stall at the of the fringe zones that are going to be there. There's going to be an opportunity to go and meet head teachers and other teaching staff. So if there's any ambassadors watching this, make sure you come along to that event. You can meet Rebecca. You'll be able to chat to her and members of her staff and find out a bit more about your school and the amazing work that you've been doing. But I just wanted to thank you so much for your time today and sharing your story. It's just so inspiring and amazing to hear.
Thank you, Lucy.